Part 2 of Alexander and the Magic Mouse. So this is where we left off. The storm has started and they are all in their house with their books and their fire and their good food. In the middle of the night, the old lady suddenly got up and lighted a candle and went downstairs to the drawing room. Magical mouse, she whispered. From between the sofa cushions came a sleepy squeak. Magical mouse, do you suppose they know down in the town that it's going to rain for 30 days and 30 nights? Surely the river will flood over its banks and wash the town away unless the people stop it. Nobody knows but us, said the magical mouse, and that was all she would say. Nobody knows but us, said the magical mouse, and that was all she would say. A tiny snore came from between the sofa cushions. The old lady shook her head in a worried way as she tiptoed back up the stairs. We must warn the people in the town, said the old lady at breakfast the next day. For surely, if it rains for 30 days and 30 nights, the river will flood over its banks and wash the town away. Quickly she put on her knitted snood and her red flannel leggings with brass buttons and her black rubber galoshes. She got out her imitation fur muff and her umbrella and went out the door. But soon she was back. Too slippery, the old lady said. You could write a note, said the yak, and I'll go. I can run down the hill in any weather. Yes, a note to the mayor, said the old lady. She wrote, Dear Mr. Mayor, I'm very sorry to tell you that it is going to rain for 30 days and 30 nights. Surely the river will flood over its bank and wash the town away unless you can think how to stop it. Yours truly, the old lady on the top of the hill. The yak took the note in her teeth and trotted out the door, but she was soon back. The bridge is washed out, said the yak, and I can't cross the river. Then I'll go, said Alexander, for I can swim any river. Be very careful, Alexander, said the old lady. She put the letter in his mouth, and off he went. He slid down the muddy hill on his stomach right into the river. He began to swim, holding his head up high so the letter would not get wet. The river was twice as wide as it usually was, and the water was dirty and cold. Alexander swam as hard as he could, but the river was terribly strong. He swam and swam and swam. He thought he was going to be washed away completely. He puffed and panted and snorted. At last, he reached the other side and crawled up the river bank. But where was the town? Alexander had been washed right past it. Now he had to walk back. It was a long way, and it is not easy for an alligator to walk even a short way. He trudged along, shivering and tired from his hard swim. Finally, he saw a main street ahead. A man with an umbrella was hurrying down the street through the rain. Alexander went up to him, smiling, to ask where the mayor lived. But the man dropped his umbrella and ran down the street, hollering, Help! Help! Alexander shook his head sadly. Then he saw a lady. He smiled at her even more beautifully. But she gave a scream and ran inside a store for safety. Then everyone on the street saw Alexander. They all yelled and screamed and dropped their umbrellas and ran away, shouting, Help! Help! Alexander was left all alone. He was ready to cry. He sat down on the empty sidewalk and tears rolled down both his cheeks, though they didn't show in the rain. Soon a little boy came splashing along, enjoying the puddles. Alexander smiled at him through his tears. The little boy stopped. He said, Hello, what's the matter? Hello, said Alexander. I've got to find someone who will give an important message to the mayor. Do you know where he lives? Yes, everyone knows. He lives at the end of this street, said the little boy. Would you give him this letter? Alexander asked, opening his mouth very wide. Sure, said the little boy, reaching in and pulling out the envelope. Oh, thank you so much, said Alexander. Don't forget. I won't. Goodbye, said the little boy, and he ran down the street toward the mayor's house. Meanwhile, in the house on top of the hill, the old lady walked up and down, up and down. Night had fallen, and still Alexander had not come back. Where can he be? The animals were all silent. I'm hungry, grumbled the brindle London squatting cat at last. Let's have dinner. The house seemed very gloomy. After dinner, the yak and the cat played checkers in front of the fire. The old lady kept going to the door and looking out into the rainy night. Finally, it was bedtime. It was very gloomy indeed. The old lady could not sleep, however. In the middle of the night, she got up and lighted a candle and went downstairs to the drawing room. Magical mouse, she whispered. A tiny squeak came from inside the piano. Magical mouse, is Alexander safe? The old lady's voice trembled. I think so, said Magical Mouse sleepily, and that is all she would say. The next morning the rain was pouring down as usual. The old lady went up to the topmost tower of the house and looked out with her telescope. At first she could see nothing but rain. Then she thought she saw people down by the river. They were building something, a wall made of bags of sand. So the mayor had received her letter. But where in the world was Alexander? All morning she looked through the telescope, hoping to see him. The brindle London squatting cat had come up the winding stairs to remind her it was lunchtime. In the afternoon, the old lady went back to the tower. Now she saw a frightful thing. The sandbag wall was higher, but the river was higher too. Which would win, the river or the wall? By 5 o'clock, it was too dark to see any more. She was just about to ring the small, shiny bell for tea when the old lady thought she heard a sound at the door. It was a wet, scratching sound. She rushed to the door and flung it open, and there was Alexander. He was muddy and cold and tired and hungry. He had no sooner come in than he began to sneeze. Quickly, a towel and some hot ginger tea, cried the old lady. They dried him off and gave him tea and some supper and put him to bed, but he kept on sneezing. No one would say so, but everyone was very worried. Alexander was sick. The next morning, before anyone else was awake, the old lady tiptoed up to the topmost tower to see if the wall by the river was still there. As she looked through the telescope, she saw a huge wave coming down the river from far away. The flood! It came nearer and nearer, but the townspeople had made the wall thick and high. The old lady held her breath. The wave came to the wall. The wave almost covered the wall. It almost went right over the top, but not quite. Hooray! Cried the old lady as the wave went on down the river. The town would be safe. She went to tell Alexander the good news. But Alexander did not answer. He did not even smile. The old lady felt his forehead. It was very hot. Oh dear, she said. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, whispered the cat and the yak who had come in to see how Alexander was. The lady made more ginger tea. The yak made yak butter especially to put in it. Even the brindle London squatting cat did his part. He lay on Alexander's bed to keep his tail extra warm. But the magical mouse could not be found. That night, long after everyone was asleep, the old lady sat beside Alexander's bed, ready in case he should want anything. At last she got up and went downstairs. Magical mouse, where are you? She whispered. Asleep, came a squeak from the chandelier. "But, Magical Mouse, how can I help Alexander?" "Look on the tea table," said the Magical Mouse. There lay a tiny white cake. On it was written in pink sugar letters, "For Alexander." "Oh, thank you, Magical Mouse," whispered the old lady, and she tiptoed upstairs again. Gently she opened Alexander's mouth and put the tiny cake inside. The next morning it was as rainy as ever, but Alexander was feeling much better. After breakfast he and the Brindle London squatting cat played Monopoly on the bed until the cat got cross because he was losing. The old lady was up in the topmost tower watching the river and the wall through the telescope. The town looked safe and secure. Every day it rained and rained and rained. They lost track of how many days it had been raining. They were out of pickled watermelon and molasses, and they were all tired of their games and books. The Brindle London squatting cat was grumpy all the time. Even the Magical Mouse got bored and ate a hole in the knitting basket. One day when she woke up, the old lady had a funny feeling. What could it be? Something was different. The whole world was very quiet. Then she knew. The rain had stopped. "Lovely," she said, looking at the bright sunshine sparkling on the wet leaves and grasses. Soon she was joined by all the animals. How glad they were to be outdoors again. It was not long before the river had shrunk to its usual size. The townspeople took away the bags of sand and began rebuilding the bridge. Soon the great rain and the flood were almost forgotten. One warm summer afternoon, the music of a brass band came floating to the windows. "My, my," said the yak, who loved music. They all ran to open the front door to see what was happening. And there was the mayor, just about to knock. The band struck up a rousing tune. When it was done, the mayor held up his hand for silence so he could make a speech. "Dear madam, you are not forgotten," he said to the old lady. "On behalf of all the people of the town, with our heartfelt thanks, I wish to present you with this silver medal." And he reached into his pocket and pulled out a handsome red box which he handed to the old lady. And the band began to play again. Oh no, it's not for me. It's for Alexander," said the old lady. When the mayor saw the alligator, he coughed nervously. But the old lady opened the box and took out the beautiful medal and hung it proudly around Alexander's neck. The band cheered. Then the old lady invited everyone into the drawing room for tea. When finally all their guests had gone, the old lady and the animals looked at each other. My," said the yak. "It is a lovely medal," said the old lady. "Humph," said the Brindle London squatting cat jealously, and he went off to take a nap. Tea time. Alexander just looked in his mirror and smiled. A tear of joy ran down his cheek. Inside a ball of yarn in the knitting basket, the Magical Mouse smiled too. The end. The end. Bye-bye.